Just to start and introduce myself, my name is Chris. I'm currently a student at Phillips Academy Andover, and I'm a BAF fellow. And with me today is my friend Arden from Phillips Academy. Just the brief intro on BAF. We are a nonprofit organization focused on accelerating the development and adoption of Web3. BAF educates its members about blockchain development, sources sponsors and speakers for our universally um, affiliated blockchain clubs. We help launch startups and support academic blockchain researchers. And lastly, we help host educational talks like this. So if you're new to BAF, please consider joining our rich community to help propel your Web3 journey. And this conversation is a part of our Beacon of Hope series, which is a BAF initiative aimed at advancing the discussion of social good projects within Web3. A large part of the promise of Web3 is its potential to fight for the freedoms taken away from us by corporations and governments, as well as building an internet that is equitable and free. And as we formulate what that exactly means, we've begun to label such a future as a decentralized society, or a DSOC for short. RadicalxChange is one of the biggest proponents in this pluralistic future, funding research and organizing think tanks in the pursuit of this endeavor. And today we have the honor of having with us today Jack Henderson. He's a digital democracy researcher with RadicalxChange, the ERC's Blockchain Glove project, and also the founder of RadicalxChange's chapter at Princeton. Thank you so much for joining us, Jack.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
So I guess just to start off, for anyone that is unfamiliar with the concept of a decentralized society, can you just briefly explain what it is, what it entails, and maybe your vision of its, I guess, perfect implementation of this concept?
Well, I'm not sure there is any perfect vision, but I can sketch, a possible direction. So yeah, DSOC means decentralized societies, and I kind of prefer the term network society, but decentralized societies is a nice twist in the Web3 world on decentralized finance. But the thinking around network society, there's the great social thinker John Dewey. He's one of my favorites. He has a lot of great books. One of them is The Public and Its Problems, which is nearly 100 years old, but I think it is just still super relevant for today. And I think it's one of the first articulations of what I think a decentralized or a network society could be. In the book, he basically argues that new technologies kind of create new forms and patterns of social interaction and interconnections between us, and therefore the governance structures need to change as technologies change as well. And um, and yet, nation states and nation state borders don't really change. And so, in an increasingly global, interconnected, complex world, democratic governance through nation states alone is not going to be sufficient for solving all of the new and emergent kind of public problems that we face in the 21st century. And so Dewey argues that we need the constant emergence of what he calls new publics, basically groups of people that come together and see each other and learn to govern themselves based on the you know recombinant sets of relationships that they have, and where people are part of intersecting and evolving publics. And so I think network society, DSOC, I think the stuff is really about getting democracy to the scale of the relevant context and problems that groups of people are trying to solve together.
So would it be fair to say you kind of see this DSOC movement or network society movement as just the next, I guess, evolution of a governing structure to, I guess, for the digital nomad?
Yeah, I think you know I think we do need to just evolve our governance structures given new affordances and problems that technology poses.
Yeah, that's a very interesting breakdown of that concept. And along with that, I guess like what are some of the most critical components of decentralized society, right? what is upholding it?
I think one of the big ones is identity, basically. In Web3 as well as in the Radical Exchange community, the ideas that we're working with have evolved a lot. It was kind of started in 2018 when Glenn Weil wrote this book, Radical Markets, which was a set of really interesting ideas for improving, things like voting and how property works and data governance and so forth. And all of those ideas were, radical and they were, you know, quite uniquely optimal solutions. Um, but they've fortunately evolved because they were really only optimal in the sense that um, in the confused sense that people are separate from each other, and that the problem that these mechanisms were trying to solve was to coordinate all of these kind of atomized individuals toward a single public good. But in reality, or in plurality, people are part of a variety of different groups, and the problem is actually about overcoming our partiality to the local groups that we're part of to cooperate more broadly. And so there's been this kind of articulation and now experimentation and building of things like soulbound tokens in the Web3 space, which is an attempt to begin to kind of formally recognize community structure, which can serve as kind of a good substrate for enabling a lot of the mechanisms we work with and a lot of the new affordances of Web3.
You used the term like plurality. What is pluralism? I guess in the lens of Web3, and how's it evolving?
Yeah, what is pluralism is a big question, and I guess I think there are so many ways to think about it. I base maybe there are two large categories of ways that I think about it. One is kind of just like more grounded and like pragmatic, and kind of instrumental. Like it serves some it helps us towards some goal, which is basically um, in society there's just an incredible diversity of ways to live life, and we all should be able to live how we want in different ways. um, but we also need to cooperate in the ways that we must to basically preserve that freedom to live differently. And so to do that, we need to recognize our differences and find ways to cooperate nonetheless and reach consensus across that diversity. Um, and so that's kind of like a pragmatic approach. And then I also think that pluralism has just kind of like a moral, an intrinsic moral value, which is, it's like, I think it speaks to just reality. Like Audrey Tang, the digital minister of Taiwan, one of the leaders of the radical exchange movement, in her job description, the last line talks about plurality being here, and I think that's like deeply true, and I I think that the best metaphor for this stuff comes from ecology, and thinking about like a rainforest. There's this the concept in ecology of there like being these ecosystems with different animals and plants and organisms, and they all have unique independent identities, and yet at the same time they're all part of this like complex web of interactions that are symbiotic with one another. And I think that like ecological symbiosis is like a great metaphor for building cooperative ecosystems of public goods and network goods. um, and I think you can there like there's this idea from Star Trek that we've been playing around with called like infinite diversity and infinite combinations. It's like this Vulcan philosophy, and I think there's just like a deep purpose, and like I personally get like a deep purpose and meaning from kind of proliferating this kind of complexity and diversity and pluralism. People, you can look to religion, others like talk about, other models for the world, like utilitarianism and things like that. And, for me, I think plurality is already here, and it's really about getting our institutions and our technology to move closer to this, true nature of our shared reality. Like, I also think about like epistemology, like that, how we think about how we think. There are many ways of knowing and thinking, and it's actually precisely in that pluralism across different ways of knowing that we, progress. Like in academia, most of the intellectual progress actually occurs at the intersections and the gaps between fields. Like, look at the responses to the pandemic and how a lot of them were, multidiscipline and cross sector even, and so forth. And so it's really about kind of bridging those perspectives toward, something higher. But it's also not about um, getting everything to be cohesive and getting rid of the diversity. Like, it's a theory of everything. Um, I don't think is the direction to go, because it breaks. Like, any one mechanism we use is going to break, and it's the differences that actually need to persist. Like, the diversity is the main thing, and so I think that, like, for epistemology and academia and stuff like that, like, we should actually see the further differentiation and speciation of knowledge itself, and then also be very invested in the bridging of those um, specialties to develop insights and applications and technologies and so forth.
I just got to say, I love that you guys are taking Star Trek to inform your model making, decision making. I like that sort of, sci-fi out there aspect, being part of the culture.
Definitely.
I was just gonna say, if my interpretation of what you said is correct, is it almost like building the system that is able to encompass, I guess, all these political philosophies, thoughts, and acknowledging that diversity of thought and life, and being able to, I guess, not really build one system, but build something that is encompassly diverse.
So, like, wait, Chris, are you saying like basically function individually but like act globally?
Right.
I personally don't think it's necessarily about just this divide between individuals and the world globally. I think it's more about the kind of network of social relationships and the constellation of social groups and people that constitute them. That is the main thing, and it's about getting those groups that partially coordinate internally their members, helping them coordinate better, and then also helping them coordinate with other groups at larger and larger scales. It's that idea of kind of an ecosystem that is symbiotic and bottom up and composable and at larger and larger scales, but scales through federation, not through going up to the global, basically.
Federation? Do you mean like like memberships? I guess, but like not in like the type of like paid membership, but like you mean as in like an association of different like I guess networks and groups. Is that what you mean?
Federation basically meaning multi-level social organization. So if you look at how the United States government is structured, you have local municipalities, but then it scales
Right.
up to states and to the national government, and then we also have these international organizations and so forth, and they all in theory correspond to the appropriate scale of the problems that they're trying to deal with. and I think we can do a better job at getting the right scale in place. But I do think there's a lot that web people in the Web3 space, technologists more generally, can learn from, because tech is, I think all tech arguably is political. I think there's a lot we can learn if we're trying to do it thoughtfully. There's a lot we can learn from how we think about political organization and political representation. Um, yeah.
Right. So, uh, sorry, this is just a great kind of segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is there's a section of the mission statement of RadicalxChange on the website that says we're committed to advancing plurality, equality, community, and decentralization through upgrading democracy, markets, the data economy, the commons, and identity. This mission statement mentions the commons, which remind me, I guess correct me if I'm wrong. Are you referring, or is the statement referring to the commons as in like the tragedy of the commons, like that kind of paper?
Yeah, the commons in that sense of the word. Yeah, basically public goods, which is in part of the discourse in one pocket of Web3, basically around Gitcoin and stuff like that.
Right.
And they've done a great job funding open source software projects in the Ethereum ecosystem with one of our mechanisms, quadratic funding. And yeah, I think the commons, there are certainly there is a global commons. Arguably, climate change is the best example of a tragedy of the kind of the global commons. But there are
Right.
also commons and public goods in every social group, basically. And we can arguably that they compose most of what the commons are. And so, as much as we want to see better funding of global open source software projects, we would love to see the funding of some network good in a particular social group.
Okay, so I guess I'll quickly explain if anybody doesn't know what the tragedy of commons is. It's essentially just if I think the initial comparison was something like, basically if you have 10 farmers and they all have one patch of grass and everybody has 50 donkeys, the grass will grow at at a replacement rate if everybody once a week feeds 10 of their donkeys. But because each person wants to feed 50 of their donkeys so that they can have 50 healthy donkeys, everybody kind of takes from the general public good to fill their own pockets, and then all the grass dies and everybody's sad. So I guess, how does DSOC or network society, or you propose to kind of solve that, or confront that tragedy of the commons?
Well, we do have one mechanism, but first I think I should say that there's a great body of thought, most notably from Eleanor Ostrom, on governing the commons effectively through various like social norms and things like that. And that's a really important part of solving the tragedy of the commons. But we do have a particular mechanism that we think speaks to one dimension of that problem, and it's quadratic funding, as I mentioned, which I should explain. It's basically it's kind of a democratic and like scalable form of matching funding for public goods. So matching funding is like a model of funding public goods where some collective entity, could be a government, could be some charitable fund, has some pool of resources that they offer to match to individual contributions to a project. And what the twist is in quadratic funding, or we sometimes call it plural funding, is that the total funding for the relevant public good is not just the sum of the individual contributions matched by this funding entity. It's actually that the total funding is the square root of each contribution to it, and then those are all summed up, and then the sum itself is squared. And basically, just to grok why that's interesting is that the funding in quadratic funding is more about the number of people who contributed, because that, you know, arguably signals the projects that really benefit a broad public, instead of, you know, just looking to fund those projects that, you know, are well funded, but probably, you know, maybe they only have a few wealthy backers behind them, and so that's going to be less of a public good, more of a private good.
So how does that I guess I'll do two sides. How does that get exploited? How can it get exploited, and how does it not get exploited?
How does quadratic funding get exploited?
Right. Cool. I mean, I don't know. You'll have to tell me if this happens or doesn't happen, but I can see at
It
least
does.
if there's no, yeah, if there's no like barrier to entry for who can donate. If I'm just like, I don't know, if I, for instance, had like a following, right? I could just get, I don't know, 10,000 people to donate $2, and that would like kind of just blow everybody out of the water,
Exactly.
and just like kind of just drain the central pool of funds. Is there, I guess, is that what you're kind of trying to fight against? Is there a way to fight against that? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think Pooja Olhaver, main author of the DSOC paper, talks about, it's like accidental cooperation or like intentional collusion, and basically what that is getting at is that's it, you know, for some public good or some network good that is being funded, if there's some smaller group of people that maybe receives a disproportionately large percentage of the value of that public good, then they can kind of extract more value from the mechanism than, you know, a thinner but broader and more diverse community of people can coordinate to fund. And that's because the mechanism of quadratic funding, again, assumes that all of these people are separate and individual and have their own motivations and are completely independent. But in fact, we have these allegiances and these loyalties and these commitments to different people. And that's what makes us unique, in fact. And part of DSOC, part of, you know, the value of things like soulbound tokens is that they can begin to enhance quadratic funding and other mechanisms for this kind of work. Because if we have a sense of the structure of the relevant community, then we can identify areas where a narrow clique of people is would otherwise extract a large percentage of these funds, but we can basically, you know, discount or give a lower weight to the fact that those people are correlated or coordinating with each other, the fact that they have social ties, and we can subsidize or give more funds to those projects that are getting contributions from a diverse and varied range of people, because that actually signals, okay, this is truly a broadly shared, diverse public good that requires, or, you know, could use more support and encouragement from this mechanism that is trying to just foster a healthy network of people, a healthy social fabric. And so if we can tweak the design to encourage consensus and cooperation across difference, then that can go a long way toward, you know, social progress and building a healthier social fabric.
And does that look like basically one soulbound token showing that you're a real person, and then another system of soulbound tokens showing that you are or are not, I guess, friends with each other? I'm just trying to envision it, I guess.
Yeah, you could see, like, you know, some of these just like proof of personhood protocols that as kind of a substrate for this, and then on top you can really, you know, proliferate it with a ton of rich, um, you know, forms of membership. Yeah, they definitely complement each other.
So I was wondering, right? I guess that essence of diversity and being able to, I guess, identity is crucial to the operation of this decentralized network. But one big conversation around that, I think, is how to build that identity in the first place. And it seems like although like a diversity is ideal, diversity can almost also be mimicked, right? Um, so I guess is there any way of solving this issue without, resorting or, going back to those bureaucratic systems that, uh, identify you as, this person and, those rigid identity structures? Um, yeah, what are, I guess, some of the solutions to, um, I guess, identity in Web3?
Yeah, that's definitely a really important question, and the DSOC paper speaks to this well as kind of an implementation challenge around how these, soulbound tokens get minted and so forth. And I thought they were really thoughtful about ways to do that, to kind of bootstrap that initially. And I'll only summarize it here briefly, but I would recommend that you refer to the paper for more detail. But it's basically just that we should first rely on kind of what Puja calls, I think, like thick communication channels. Basically, use more legitimate, already existing, um, trusted forms of social relationships that we can see arguably in the real world, um, or the physical world. Memberships that are already existing, and use those kind of entities to begin to issue these kind of soulbound tokens basically. And we already see some implementations that are exciting in that direction, like Gitcoin, which again has this grants program that has been really great at scaling quadratic funding. Has come out with what they call Gitcoin Passport, which is a way to kind of hold on to these different memberships that you're a part of, and then they use it to inform um, basically the how your contributions get matched. And I'm not sure if they do this yet, but eventually those soulbound tokens could also kind of gate access to particular funding rounds for some subgroup, some sub community that is trying to fund its local network goods. But no, it's definitely a good implementation challenge, and we don't want it to become bureaucratic, obviously. And so it's an open question, an open area of experimentation on how to do that well. Um, Issuing these tokens such that they are speak to some true relationship, and that nobody um, is manipulating the system. And the DSOC paper is very in depth on how to confront that problem. So I would refer you to that.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting challenge to tackle, and as someone who's, I guess, getting into this space and understanding the developments behind this decentralized network, very interesting to investigate. But I guess a question to add on to that, it seems like even the aspect of quadratic voting itself is largely important and useful if it's, I guess, um, implemented more widely. However, it seems to me that a big part of that roadblock is identity. So, you think it's important for us to build this network um, with everything at once, or could, for example, we implement quadratic funding along with, I guess, traditional systems, and as we grow out of it, grow into that more decentralized network? Like, for example, like having like KYC as um, just you know verification of identity.
I definitely think we should do it gradually. I guess stepping back, the way I think about this generally, like going back to this kind of new publics idea from Dewey, like I I think that this isn't the first time we've tried to map our governance structures onto the new social groups that and interactions that we have given advances in technology. Like I think the American Constitution in the what had a design that made sense for the social context of the late 18th century and its like demographics and tech. And I think like in the 20th century, like the advance in communications technology and travel affordances like airplanes, like that stuff helped lead to things like the United Nations and institutions for global governance and so forth. And now I think we have this new kind of constitutional moment with the internet and social media, because like with nation states, you basically know the citizens, like the polity, the group of people that you're talking about and that are you're trying to help govern themselves. But on the internet, you don't know who you're talking about. And so we have to put up some fences and gates, in these systems, because if it's just truly permissionless, then it will just get attacked ruthlessly by outsiders. I know there's this idea in Web3 about that it's totally permissionless, but it's actually just permissioned by money. Like if it's whether it's access to compute power for proof of work, or if it's access to coins for proof of stake, um, it's not permissionless. It's plutocratic, oligarchic, and we should really rethink about what these systems are permissioned by, and I think we can move closer to it being permissioned by the social relationships that you have. Um, yeah.
Okay, so I guess obviously this constitution of a decentralized society is pretty new, but the idea of decentralized society to any respect isn't new. Like for instance, there's like and communes and stuff, and communism going back to like 1850s, and then Epicurean societies like way back thousands of years ago. Um, but they haven't really succeeded at scale for one reason or another. Often at the coordination level with Epicurean societies, or corruption. Often, I guess, how do you think Web3 can be necessary and can succeed in enabling this kind of uh, often idealized society?
Yeah, I think those attempts at, I wouldn't say those are attempts at kind of a network society. That those were more kind of like collectivist approaches, which I
Right.
think their failure came from their confusion. That again, they thought they were all a bunch, they all thought that, yeah, we're individuals, but let's just be good together, and we'll just like become part of this one singular whole global good, um, and that was the goal. But really, I think collectives are just like one side of a coin with individuals on the other, and it's again about the constellation of social relationships, the social network. Um, like that's the thing, and so I think those attempts were failures. But talking about the American Constitution, talking about these global governance institutions, now this moment with the internet, I think those are examples of progress in that direction. And I recently heard a great point about this stuff from Danielle Allen, talking about geography and how with the American Constitution, um, it was designed with one premise being geographic dispersal, as part of the design itself, because the dispersal meant that those people with extreme views, they couldn't find each other. They had to they stayed in their local context, the city that they were in, and the extreme views they had were just kind of part of they were put in check by just kind of as part of the pluralism and the natural tensions in the local area. And to act on those extreme views, they had to go through representatives, and those representatives acted as filters and mediators. And um, James Madison, the American founder, saw that dispersal as a premise of the constitutional design of America's political founding. So that's the first point. The second point is that if social media in the 21st century has done one thing, arguably, it's been connecting like-minded people, most notably those with extreme views. And so there you have it. A premise of the design, the American Constitution, has been thrown out. And we need to, reclaim, bring back that notion, but into our online network governance systems, and I don't think we have that yet. That element of confronting and reconciling difference in public life toward the common good. We don't have that. The internet was initially imagined in that spirit, in that way, as a foundation for a network society, but um, it only got some great, but they were thin, like communication protocols going. And I think we can do a lot more today with modern computation, the affordances of 21st century tech, and there are just like an exciting network of research and products out there around thinking about what could digital public spaces look like, where there is a lot of diversity and different views that nonetheless are the algorithms highlight the points of consensus across them, and they encourage conversation across lines of difference. um, it's totally a possibility, but we need to um, choose to steer technology in that direction. um, yeah.
So it's in structuring, I guess, it's in structuring uh, the society to move towards the common good, whether an individual or a group of individuals is trying to or not.
um, I I wouldn't say it's whether they're trying to or not. Are I think people are generally good, and it's the manifestations socially that can be good or bad. And the big project here is creating institutions and tools and technologies that help bring out the best of us and avoid our worst sides. The pitfalls that are created socially, bringing our social technologies, closer, um, and at more scale, the richness that we have in person with our close relationships, helping bring that richness, that complexity, to larger and larger scales.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I didn't mean that the people were innately trying to hurt everybody. Just their I guess functions of trying to go about that of
Mhm.
helping. But
I guess in the question of like equality and diversity, um, I guess how I guess will this decentralized network affect people globally the same way? As in, it seems like largely it's building digital infrastructure that I guess may benefit more people. Yeah, we still have people around the world with struggling physical infrastructure. I guess is this movement defined by its like digital realm, or does it have implications in the physical realm too?
Definitely has physical implications. We still have physical bodies. We move about the world. We're going to need to figure out better ways to um, build better roads and bridges and transportation and public health and education and all of those good things. Um, if the new products and new projects that we help bring about are not feeding back into real contexts and real communities, then I think we're failing. I think that's the whole purpose of this.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest, or for me, that's the biggest worry of the space right now, or especially, the prior months when the hype was still here. Is that I guess the exploitation of greed and the focus on the hyper financialization of every aspect
And
to
we're going to
really
go
like
Exactly.
into my pet
milk out, I guess every sense, and I guess almost um, push this narrative towards more of a, I guess, skew the Web3 promise. But um, I guess what are the, you know, how do we as a community, right, help lead or lead and inspire um, others towards that path of, um, you know, actual good done by this space, right?
Yeah.
Actual use cases and actual impact instead of a lot of the flowery stuff that's just thrown out there right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I would break it into two parts. There's like a, Web3 has like a technical, like engineering side, and then they have like a socio-technical cultural side. And I think both are important to analyze and highlight here. And you're totally right. Like technically, I think Web3 has the hyper financialization has been its curse. And I think socially, it's been too narrow of a group, and that we need broader participation to achieve broad legitimacy and affect the real world in positive ways. And so I think moving forward, and that's not just like Web3. I think is like there's still a lot going for it that we need to highlight and hold on to as precious and make sure that we nurture it. I think on the technical engineering side, there are really, like really exciting new affordances here. Like multi-sigs are a really great way of managing common assets, common property, than the typical complex legal mechanisms that we've had to use in the past. Or there's this new, um, largely underappreciated aspect of like the affordances of blockchain that is beginning to get researched. Glenn and his colleague at Microsoft, Shrey Jane, have been thinking a lot about common knowledge, which is this idea in like game theory and political science. It's like a recursive thing where, like, it's for coordination. Like if everyone knows that everyone knows something, like if I send you a message, I want to know that you got the message. And I think you would like to know, you would be better off if you knew that I knew that you got the message. It's a little confusing, but it's actually like a very rich form of knowledge and shared understanding. And in the literature, they think of common knowledge as being very core to collective action and to coordination. And blockchains are actually really good at that. They're better than most other communication protocols at achieving common knowledge. And I think if we can realize that, and if we can start to um, enhance that even further by incorporating like privacy tech, so that, I think one problem with blockchains is that, or at least we can just enhance it, because most forms of knowledge, most truth, isn't global. It's in a context. It's social knowledge. And so if we can bring the architecture to again correspond to the relevant social context, where most forms of common knowledge sit, then that's a really great thing that blockchains can help bring about. And then on this, like, socio-technical side, like Web3 has given us this amazing window of opportunity, what Hannah Arendt would call this moment of public freedom, that I think is arguably more important than the engineering stuff. And it's just this like social energy for experimenting with new social systems here. And I think like this social conversation around digital democracy that we're having really wouldn't be possible without like a broader conversation around Web3 that has been creating a lot of interest in things like digital democracy. And yeah, that's why I and everyone involved at RadicalxChange is deeply engaged in the Web3 space, because we want to see it become, part of important public digital infrastructure for the 21st century. And we can definitely do it, but we just need to see the minority of things in the space that are really exciting and important, and encourage that, and bring in more public engagement to shaping and engaging with those technologies.
Right. And I think that's what I love about the initiative at BAF, and also like the crucial, like the importance of discussions like this I guess like the emphasis of a lot of clubs are still to focus on the financialization aspect. However, like most, I'd say like even like 95%, I think that's a low number of people realize the possibility for blockchain enrichment of society, right? And to be able to inspire youth at this level, I wouldn't say like indoctrinate them, but to let them see the opportunity of how you know you know I guess the potential, right? That is very, very empowering and I guess promising for the future of blockchain. And there's a lot of good things said today, and I can go on forever. But since we have limited time left, I'd like to open the floor to anybody who has a question or wants to participate or wants to say something. Just request for the speaker role, and I can accept it for you. But I guess to fill the silence, I just going back to RadicalxChange specifically. I'm curious about more of like the physical initiatives that RadicalxChange is taking. I guess how the common people can help participate, right, in influencing and in spreading this message.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think we do, different things. We have to wear many different hats, but I think one thing we do is building networks around all of these ideas and making progress on open research questions. So we have these different research groups that are happening. We help kind of consult on different experiments. So the Colorado state government, the Nashville city council, the Taiwanese government, other entities around the world have used quadratic voting for various purposes, allocating their budget, things like that. We host events like what we just did in Poland and at DevCon. We have chapters around the world. We could use a lot more student ones, so I hope to see you start one at Andover, and would love to talk more about getting that off the ground. And we hope that those, all of these things can really fit together because it's a social movement, and we need a lot of different people in talking about this stuff in different ways, and bringing experiments into different contexts, and to connect those back with the research so that we can make progress on new questions and things like that.
Right, and I feel like it's like with initiatives like City 3, I think like even with like civil participation in projects like that, and even putting your vote in, and funding some projects that you believe in your community. I mean, that's that if everyone can just take that small step, where I think that this future, or whether it's far out or not, it'll definitely come soon. But anyways, I think this is about a good time to wrap up. Thank you so much for giving us your perspective on decentralized networks and the mission at RadicalxChange. Hopefully, I guess we can cooperate with you guys to, I guess, help bring that perspective to the broader blockchain clubs at BAF, and assist them in orchestrating these conversations, because I think that it is very inspiring and empowering to be a part of this movement. And I think if more people, you know, if more people at least hears the message, right? I think that's going to help a lot in perpetuating it.
I couldn't agree more. We need people like you. So let's definitely do it.
Anyways, thank you so much again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for
it's been
listening.
my pleasure.